Hello and welcome to the KPI Institute's webinar, How to Conduct a Performance Culture Audit. My name is Andrei Kostia and I will be your host for today along with our presenter Aline Shonda. This webinar is part of a series of free educational materials that aim to enhance the knowledge and know-how of those interested while also creating a bridge between us as a company and you, our public. The KPI Institute is a research organization specialized in business performance. It operates research programs in 12 practice domains, each linked to a certification course, ranging from strategy and KPIs to employee performance and from customer service to innovation performance. The KPI Institute continuously builds on its values of best know-how, data and facts, and common sense to achieve its mission of integrating performance as a discipline through research, publications, and, what interests us today, through educational programs such as this webinar. Today, 13 years after the KPI Institute was created, we can proudly say that our products have reached professionals in 5 continents and that our public comprises a worldwide community of 73,000 members online and 28,000 registered companies on smartkpis.com. Today's webinar focuses on teaching participants how to assess whether their organizational culture promotes and rewards performance, and it will be delivered by Aline Shonda, the Head of Performance Audit Services at the KPI Institute, with over 10 years of experience in the banking sector. For more than 3 years, he was an internal auditor, gaining an analytical perspective on operations and valuable insight on risk assessment and auditing methods and procedures. As an auditor, he holds valuable experience in the design and implementation of internal processes to properly identify and assess risk and compliance with regulations and reporting requirements. This presentation lasts for 45 minutes. Please feel free to ask any questions you might have during the webinar, as they will be answered at the end of the presentation in our Q&A session. Enjoy the KPI Institute's webinar, How to Conduct a Performance Culture Audit. Now, I would like to invite Aline to begin his presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Andrei. It's nice being here and hosting this webinar. Hello and welcome. Thank you everyone for joining in. Today we're going to talk about how to conduct a performance culture audit. Basically, we're trying to assess the maturity level of the performance culture capability of organizations. Now, we're going to talk about the benefits of such an audit, some key knowledge areas that are being assessed. We're talking about the maturity model that we have developed to indicate the maturity level of the current capability for developing a performance-oriented culture. We're going to talk about the audit process, and I'll give you some examples of how we do the assessment. I will present to you the audit outputs. This is the audit report, the roadmap for improvement, and we'll have a dedicated session at the end for questions and answers. Now, the learning objectives of this webinar is for you to acknowledge how to support a competitive advantage through developing a performance-oriented culture. You will understand the impact of such an audit, and you will get familiar with the main tools that are used for auditing the performance culture capability. Now, you will also get valuable insights on the audit process and the use of the audit outputs. We're going to develop all these topics throughout the webinar. Now, let's start with the benefits. First of all, we are assessing the ability of the organization to develop a performance-oriented culture. So, first, we ensure that the organization has the right tools, processes, and people in the right place. Next, we're going to identify the maturity level, as I've mentioned before, using our maturity model, and we will learn how to progress from one maturity level to the next one. This is the value added by the audit outputs, showing you a structured guidance on how to progress from one maturity level to the next one. Another benefit of this audit is to maximize the added value generated by all the processes that you set in place to develop a performance-oriented culture. And it'll help audited organizations to elevate current practices to best practices. By the audit outputs that we deliver, we support progress with implementing initiatives. We provide audit organizations with a roadmap for improvement and an infographic. This is a report and a tool that can be used, for example, during monthly performance review meetings to check progress with initiatives. Another benefit is educating stakeholders to be oriented towards continuous learning and improving. And this is also an objective when we talk about developing a performance-oriented culture. So top management or senior management announcing that the performance culture capability is audited should educate stakeholders to be oriented towards continuous learning and improvement. And also, it can justify investments in process improvement. Maybe you've invested in a library of resources available for all employees to encourage knowledge sharing. Maybe you've invested in well-being programs for your employees and redesigning and improving the spaces for lunch, for breaks, and so on. And any investments you might have done in the aspects that help develop a performance-oriented culture. Now, the key knowledge areas for this audit are the following 6. The integrated performance capability, basically the ability to align and integrate the performance management system across the entire organization, across all areas and all functions. We assess the communication and leadership support. And when I say communication, I'm talking about transparency in communicating performance results and the support that senior leadership or top management offers towards the performance management system, how much they promote it. We're gonna assess the next section, creativity and innovation. We're gonna look at the channels open for employees to submit improvement ideas, for example. Then we're gonna look at education and knowledge. We're gonna look at the available resources for education. There are composed and put in a library for employees, physical or online. It doesn't really matter, just to know that it's there and they have a possibility to develop both personal and professional. And we're talking about knowledge sharing in this section. The next section is benefits and recognition. And here we're going to talk about bonus schemes for financial rewards, whether bonuses are offered based on performance results, and we're also going to talk about a non-financial reward scheme to motivate and engage the employees. And the last section is happiness and well-being. And here we're going to discuss about the well-being programs that the organization has in place to improve the health of employees, to assure a positive mindset and attitude in their day-to-day activities. Now, this is a slide for one of our training courses. It's called Certified Performance Management Professional. It's an entire course about performance improvement and how you can drive performance improvement for your organization. Now, I took this slide because it's representative for the topic we have today, and specifically the performance culture audit. And I'm going to show you the main components as they are presented in our course. Efficiently communicating performance results. The first step in developing a performance-oriented culture is for employees, for stakeholders to know exactly how the organization is performing. Now, on the corporate level or organizational level, but also on the departmental level. And we are talking about transparency in communicating performance results. Another big component is a comprehensive performance management system. And when I say comprehensive, I mean that everybody needs to understand how the performance management system works, what are the components, the tools, the processes, and so on. We're looking to see whether there is a dedicated capability, whether we have a strategy management office, a performance management office, or roles in the organization that have the main task of overseeing the performance management system, overseeing the performance results, the areas that are underperforming, and so on. Another big component is compensation. rewarding people for performance. This encourages a performance-oriented culture. We have here also the gamification. This is about internal competitions that I've mentioned before to engage employees and to make them wish for better performance. Now, let's move on to a poll. I want to ask you, regarding the performance culture, is there transparency in regards to organizational and departmental performance results among the employees? And I'm talking here about your organization. When I say organizational performance results, I'm talking about the entire organization, and departmental performance results, I'm talking the results of the sales department, of the marketing department, logistics, and so on, even HR department. Now, please take 1 minute to answer this poll. Your options are high to very high extent or degree, moderate extent, moderate degree, and very small to small extent or degree. I will ask my colleague to put up the poll. Thank you, Andrei. Okay, most of you had a chance to answer the poll. Andrei, can we see the results? Okay, so most of you, oh, it's a tie. 40% answer to this question, moderate extent. So there is transparency in regards to performance results in a moderate extent, and 40% of you also said in a very small to small extent. So this is not very good, to be honest. It means there are a few steps to be made towards developing a performance-oriented culture, because as I said before, if you don't know how are you performing, how can you wish for a better performance? I mean, you first got to know where you stand and what are the results to know how you can improve. Now, there's a point why I've asked you this question, or to give answers, because the same statement as part of our State of Performance Improvement and KPI in Practice report. This is a research study that is performed as a survey to our professional network of over 70,000 professionals working in the performance management field. And as you can see here, the results are quite different, as 36% of respondents said that there is transparency in regard to performance results in a high to very high extent. Now, I want to tell you something. Transparency raises employee confidence while endorsing a healthy performance culture. Moreover, it stimulates an inspiring working environment in which performance results are ensured availability to all employees. Sharing both organizational and departmental results encourages employee participation in the performance and progress of their company. Now, as I said, most of the participants, 38% answered moderate extent, 36% said high to very high extent, and still a significant number, 26% answered with very small to small extent. This is also proof that there is still work to be done in terms of developing performance-oriented cultures. Now, as a research-based organization, and I'm talking here about the KPI Institute, we are specialized in business performance. So we're interested in the way organizations use performance management systems, the challenges they face, as well as their latest practices in improving performance. And you'll see throughout this webinar that this is how we basically made the framework to audit the performance culture capability and all the other four. It's based on best practices. Now, this report that I've mentioned, the State of Performance Improvement and KPI in Practice, it highlights the findings from our ongoing efforts of identifying issues, trends, and best practices impacting the field of key performance indicators and performance management, performance improvement. Now, let's move on with the presentation. Thank you all very much for answering the poll. Let's see exactly how we show organizations exactly where they stand. First, maturity models are tools used to assess the complexity of a certain organizational capability or system. Now, for the topic today, we're assessing the complexity of the performance culture capability. So the complexity is reflected on a 5-level scale. The 5 levels are level 1 initial, level 2 emergent, level 3 structured, level 4 integrated, and level 5 optimized. There is clear criteria that defines each maturity level, and this is how the maturity model is built. And what's very important and that you need to know is that progression from one maturity level to another becomes more difficult as maturity increases. Now, in other words, it's easier to get from level 1 initial to level 2 emergent than it is to get from level 4 integrated to level 5 optimized. Now, let's get into the fun part and talk about the audit process. I'll tell you in a few words how we conduct the audit. The first main component out of 3 is the evidence-based assessment. And this evidence-based assessment is a review of relevant internal documents to assess more than 25 statements that reflect best practices. And this is how the auditor assesses the capability. He has to rate those 25 statements on a scale from 1 to 5 based on several assessment criteria. Now you have here a 90 assessment criteria. This is in total for the whole capability, for the whole audit, for the performance culture audit. We have more than 25 statements in the evidence-based assessment, and these statements are supported by more than 90 assessment criteria. But you'll understand exactly what I mean by assessment criteria in the following steps of this webinar. I'll give you some clear examples. Now, what you need to know is that these statements from the evidence-based assessment, they capture the main characteristics of performance culture processes, related processes, okay? And this is about communication, leadership support, supporting creativity, supporting education and knowledge, and as you've seen, the well-being of employees. Now, the second main component is the perception-based assessment. And we have here also more than 25 statements that reflect best practices. They as well have to be rated on a scale from 1 to 5, but they have to be rated based on the extent to which they apply in the audited organization. And this is what the internal key stakeholders have to do. Basically, it's a survey that is sent out to selected key stakeholders to be answered. And they have to rate them from 1 to 5 based on the extent to which they apply. So to a small and very small extent, to a small extent, to a medium extent, high extent, and so on. High to very high extent. Similar to the poll that we just had. Okay, the third component in the audit process is the interview-based assessment. And it's about interviews held with selected key stakeholders to ensure consistency in results. Maybe there are statements in the evidence-based assessment that the auditor was not able to rate with reviewing the documents that were provided to him. Maybe he needs additional documents. Maybe the information was not clear in the documents that he received and he just needs some clarifications. We also look at high variances in responses for the perception-based assessment. Basically, the responses provided by internal key stakeholders to the survey, to the maturity model survey that we deployed, and also trying to find out why. Now, this is not a surprise. It's usually common to have a different perception about performance management practices or performance culture from one department to another. Just think, for example, how performance is seen in a sales department and how performance is seen in a logistics department. So basically, it's a bit different. Now, all these components, the evidence-based assessment, the perception-based assessment, and the interview-based assessment, are supported by a dedicated online platform, and this is gpaunit.org. That means no crowded Excel sheets and automated processes. Now, to help the auditor to speed up the process and consolidate his findings. At the end of the assessment, the statements that were rated from 1 to 5 by the auditor from the evidence-based assessment are calculated as simple average. They result in a score, that's the evidence-based assessment score. And the same, the statements from the perception-based assessment, basically from the survey that were rated by internal key stakeholders, are calculated as a simple average, and they provide the perception-based assessment score. Now, the first one, for the evidence-based assessment, the first score weighs 75% in the final score, while the perception-based assessment score weighs only 25%. And this is normal because we're looking at actual versus perceived. So the actual weighs 75%, the perception weighs 25%. And that's how the final score is calculated. Now, depending on the final score, we determine the maturity level of the performance culture capability. Now, I'll give you an example. From a score from 151 to 2.7, the maturity level is emergent. Now, from 371 to 4.5, the maturity level is integrated. Okay. I'll give you some assessment examples now to better understand what the statements are all about, what the assessment criteria is all about, and we're taking the sections one by one. We're going to start with the integrated performance capability. And I have another poll here. I have a question for you. I want to know, to what extent is the strategy or performance management system used by your organization aligned and integrated with the budgeting system or budgeting process? Your options are the same as before: high to very high extent or degree, moderate extent, moderate degree, and very small to small extent or very small to small degree. Now, please take 1 minute to answer the poll. I will ask my colleague Andre to set it up. Now I have a joke for you while you answer the poll. I read it just yesterday. Performance management is like working on a sunny day. It can be frustrating while you're doing it, but the rewards for getting finished are there if you make an effort. Okay, you're starting to like polls. Almost everyone got a chance to answer in 40 seconds. I will ask my colleague Andre, can we see the results? Oh, this is very good. We have a different story here. Not so much transparency, but a high level of integration. I see that half of you answered that the strategy or performance management system is aligned with the budgeting process in a high to very high extent. This is very good. 33% of you answered moderate extent, and still a significant percentage answered very small to small extent. Now, as before, there is a reason why I've asked this question. The same statement was in our State of Performance Improvement and KPI in Practice report, and we had kind of similar results. You can see them here. This is the results regarding integration with the budgeting process. And you can see by the image in my screen that it is aligned with budgeting in 43% of cases,
Aline,
You
just
can
one
also
moment.
see,
We cannot see
yes,
your screen for some reason. Can you try resharing again?
just a second.
Good, now we can.
Yes, it's back again. Okay, so 43% high to very high extent, 31% moderate extent, 26% very small to small extent. Now, we didn't just ask about the budgeting system or process. We also asked about the quality management system. And as you see here, the same results, 44%, the majority answered high to very high extent, 34% said to moderate extent, and 22% very small to small extent. Again, this is for the quality management system integrated with the performance management system. And we didn't stop here. We asked another question. What about the process management system? Because change is important and happens a lot. It's frequent. So we have a tie here between high to very high extent and moderate extent. So I was very pleased to see that we have high percentages in responses for high to very high extent, because these three systems, I'm talking about budgeting, quality, and process management, accommodate important processes for the organizations, which should be ideally aligned with the performance management initiatives. By integrating budgeting with the performance management system, professionals can ensure the necessary financial support for all performance improvement endeavors. Now, regarding quality management, organizations which abide by internationally recognized quality standards, I'm talking about here ISO standards, for example, are prone to deliver high quality services and products. And moreover, performance management is a process in itself that should adhere to internal process management practices. So let's get back to the integrated performance capability. This is an example from the evidence-based assessment. It's one of the statements from the evidence-based assessment, and it says there is a comprehensive performance management manual or procedure related to organizational performance management. Now, this is the statement that the auditor has to rate on a 1 to 5 scale based on assessment criteria. And you have here the assessment criteria. This is an example, the assessment criteria for the statement that I've just shown you. And it says the manual procedure should include a presentation of the performance management tools, performance management processes descriptions, the approach to engaging stakeholders in different processes, and I'm talking here about performance review, about KPI selection, and so on, and the roles and responsibilities of all stakeholders. Now, the last webinar was on performance management. You've learned then about KPI owners and data custodians that want the employees that are engaged on a day-to-day basis with the performance management system. Now, also for the integrated performance capability, oh, wait, I told you that I'm going to show you how the online platform supports the process. Now, this is a screenshot from the online platform, the backend used by an auditor. This is the statement that I've just shown you. There is a comprehensive performance management manual or procedure related to organizational performance management. You have the assessment criteria for score 1, score 2, score 3, score 4, and the assessment criteria for score 5. So basically, no additional reading, with no additional reading, just by working with the platform, the auditor can see the criteria. We provide guidance on where to find the information so he can rate the statements. He has a dedicated field for observations, which can be later on downloaded in compact form. Yeah, for each statement you have observations and document reference. Document reference to write down exactly where you had this information that allowed you to give a certain score. Now, this is good for discussing the outputs with the audit organization to make sure you don't have any disputes or contradictory facts in the audit report. Now, here's an example also for the integrated performance capability. It's an example from the perception-based assessment, and it's a statement saying employees have a good understanding of what their role and contribution is towards achieving the entity's strategic objectives. Because this is basically the end objective, the scope, the meaning is achieving the strategic objectives. Developing a performance-oriented culture will help the organization achieve its strategic objectives. So this is a statement that you can sure, the reason is obvious why this statement has to be rated by internal stakeholders. Now, we should interview each employee to assess whether they have a good understanding of what their role and contribution is towards achieving the entity's strategic objectives. So it's better for them to answer this question, and it's part of the perception-based assessment as it reflects their perception. And for this statement, for example, we have high variances in answers. So this was the first section, integrated performance capability. This is how the online platform supports the perception-based assessment. The survey is deployed through the online platform, and you have here a section. It said user results list. You can export the contact details of the users that they have to fill in when they start the survey, and you can export all the questions answers with the average score already calculated. So it's very easy to get the results for both the perception-based assessment and the evidence-based assessment. Now let's move on to communication and leadership support. This is a statement from the evidence-based assessment. The organization has a well-designed and implemented performance communication plan. Now, this statement, being from the evidence-based part, has to be rated by an auditor, and the criteria is the communication plan should include a breakdown of information on different types of audience. This is about what do I tell all employees, what can I tell all employees regarding performance results, what can and I should tell my shareholders or the general public or regulators and so on. So a breakdown of information is needed to encourage transparency, because otherwise performance results will be distributed to a limited number of stakeholders. Now, another assessment criteria for this statement is that the communication plan should include both internal and external stakeholders. It should mention the frequency of communication. It should be clear each month, each day, each week, each year, depending on the performance results. And it has to include the plan, both physical and online communication channels. So this will be the assessment criteria for this statement. That's part of the evidence-based assessment for the section communication and leadership support. Again, this is the platform with the statement, criteria for each score that the auditor can easily use to get the assessment done, to conduct the audit. Okay, a statement from the perception-based assessment. There is a continuous and relentless support from the senior management towards the development of performance management capabilities and best practices within the entity. This is very important from my point of view. As much as the performance management system and related capabilities and practices are promoted by senior management, employees will take it seriously, will understand that it's something important, that's it's something valuable for top management, and it should be for them also. Now, this is a statement that internal stakeholders have to rate on a scale from 1 to 5. They have to assess whether there is a continuous and relentless support from senior management. Okay, moving on to the next section, it's creativity and innovation. I have an example here. There is an innovation management framework in the organization. What do I mean by innovation management framework? I'll show you. Well, first of all, various channels open for employees to submit innovation ideas. Okay, I mean an email address, a physical channel, discussions, I don't know, dedicated sections during performance appraisals, section for observations in meetings. I mean, everybody should be encouraged to suggest improvement and innovation ideas. Now, another criteria to assess this statement is there is a channel for improvement suggestions for external stakeholders. Like most organizations have channels for complaints and suggestions, and this is very important. Now, another assessment criteria is a committee responsible for assessing all innovation and improvement ideas proposed by staff and deciding on further course of action. So it's not enough to gather ideas. We have to make a committee to assess them and decide whether to implement them or not. And as the last criteria here, we have a reward system for best ideas. We can only encourage employees to submit innovation ideas if we reward them, because otherwise they'll do it for a period, but after then they'll stop. Okay, so we have a statement from the perception-based assessment. The entity understands the importance of allowing a certain level of autonomy and flexibility in the employee's working agenda as a lever of creativity and innovation. This is something that they have to answer. Now, imagine the difference between an organization with very creative employees, like an advertising company. Okay, there is a high level of autonomy and flexibility in their working agenda, and imagine a different story with a production company, where the tasks are rather easy and clear, and you can't step aside the procedure or the working instruction. So they have to rate and they have to rate the statement on a scale from 1 to 5, because they know best. I'm talking here about employees, about how much autonomy and flexibility they have in their working agenda. Okay, moving on to the next section, it's education and knowledge. I'll give you an example from the evidence-based assessment. Knowledge sharing is a common and welcomed practice in the organization. This is a statement that has to be rated by the auditor, and this is the assessment criteria. An internal library of resources available for employees. And I'm talking here about resources for their professional and their personal development. Internal knowledge sharing sessions are organized. Now imagine we are an institute that delivers training programs. So we have regular knowledge sharing sessions with all the trainers, all the people from the organizations that deliver training programs, to discuss about challenges, news, trends, and so on. What we've learned from our practice, and to learn what others have learned from their practice. Now, another criteria is knowledge sharing sessions for all hierarchical levels, okay, not just management levels, discussing challenges, issues, working methods, and so on. No, I'm talking about even at frontline levels or middle management and so on, to have these knowledge sharing sessions for all those who can benefit from them. Now, another assessment criteria is the percentage of employees that attended such sessions. So the auditor has to rate this statement considering even the percentage of employees that attended such sessions. Now, an example from the perception-based assessment. The organization invests in modern technology to create a supportive, learning, and productive environment. Now, as well, as this audit service is usually conducted off-site, we receive documents from the audit organization. It will be very hard for us to assess whether the organization invests in modern technology. We could ask for some, I don't know, documents or related documents, relevant documents, but it's better if the statement is in perception-based assessment, because it leaves it up to the employees to express their opinion about the investments made in modern technology to support learning and a productive environment. So as you already got used to it, the perception-based assessment example, the statement example, has to be rated by internal key stakeholders. Okay, we're moving on to benefits and recognition. We have an example here from the evidence-based assessment. There is a non-financial reward scheme in the organization. Now, this section is not only about non-financial rewards, it is also about financial rewards. I chose to give you an example from the non-financial part, because I think this is as important as the financial part, and it's something that we need to develop as professionals in the performance management field, um, to improve our know-how in this field. So the assessment criteria for this statement is the employees can choose the reward from more options. Yeah, it's a best practice in giving options to the employee that has to be awarded. Rewards offered at the request of the manager and his peers, and this is about collecting proposals, and not only managers can propose people for awards, and this is, I don't know, I'll give you a basic example like the employee of the month, or the employee of the year, or team of the quarter, and so on. It's best if not only the managers can propose or nominate employees, but as well as colleagues can nominate. Another assessment criteria is rewards pro-social behaviors and business-centered actions. This is about not being so only business-oriented and giving rewards for good professional results, but also for pro-social behaviors, like the people from organizations that organize outdoor activities or CSR actions, and so on. And another assessment criteria is rewards are available for all hierarchical levels. Yes, this is very important. You can have high-performing employees at all levels, and they all deserve to be rewarded. Now, an example from the perception-based assessment. The reward scheme of the entity increases the employee's motivation level. This is something that internal key stakeholders have to rate from 1 to 5 based on the extent to which it applies in their organization. Maybe it's more formal, maybe it's really engaging and motivating. They will have to tell us as part of the assessment. And the last section in this performance culture audit is the section dedicated to happiness and well-being. Now, the example for the evidence-based assessment here is there is an effective well-being program in the entity dedicated to employees. Now, the assessment criteria is rather different here. For score 1, the practice is not present. That means there is no well-being program. To give you more examples here, if we're talking about well-being programs, we can talk about subscriptions of the company to medical services, offering employees discounts to medical services, or partnerships with local gyms to give them better discounts to go exercise, and so on. We can talk about discounts at other partners. I used to work in the banking systems. We had a full range of benefits. We could benefit from discounts on clothes, on cars, on telephones, and so on. But this is because of the size of the bank and so on, the resources and the power in negotiating partnerships. But it can go as simple as offering a glass of milk to the employees that work in production. So the well-being program has to exist in any form, or which form. We can make suggestions for improvement and so on, but basically the organization has to show them that the employees that they are doing something for their well-being, for their health, for them to achieve the desired performance levels, and for the organization to achieve the strategic objectives. So for score 2, we're giving score 2 if less than 5% of employees took part at least once or benefited at least once from a well-being program. And it goes the same for score 3. It's between 5 and 10% of employees that benefit. For score 5, for score 4, between 10% and 20%, and so on. For score 5, more than 20% of employees should have benefited from a well-being program. Now, an example from the perception-based assessment: the employees maintain generally a positive attitude and mindset and show confidence in their behavior and actions. They have to rate this statement. I'm talking about selected internal key stakeholders. The employees maintain a positive attitude and mindset, and this is basically one of the main reasons why you should try to develop a performance-oriented culture. For everyone to have a positive attitude and mindset, for them to be confident that if they achieve high performance, they will be rewarded, and for them to wish, as well as the stakeholders wished, for the organization to achieve all its strategic objectives. Now, I've given you 6 statements from the evidence-based assessment, 6 statements from the perception-based assessment. Remember that the audit is based on more than 25 statements in the evidence-based assessment and more than 25 statements in the perception-based assessment. Now, I'm going to talk to you in the following minutes about the outputs, what the audited organizations get from this audit. First of all, it's an audit report that contains findings and recommendations related to the statements and the assessment criteria that I've presented in part before throughout the webinar. They have the scores here achieved for each statement, as you can see in the picture, and as I said, findings and recommendations for performance improvement. Now, alongside the audit report, we provide an executive dashboard, and this comprises the scores achieved for each capability and each section. Now, for those of you that took part in all the webinars in this series, you know the complete product, the complete service is the integrated performance audit, and it is an audit that assesses the strategic planning capability, performance measurement, performance management capability, the ability to develop a performance-oriented culture. Yeah, this is the audit about we're talking about today, and assessing the employee performance management, how the organization manages individual performance. So if the organization chooses the complete service, the complete audit service, and goes for an integrated performance audit, we will have all the 5 capabilities that were assessed with all the sections. Now, if they only choose to audit the performance culture capability, in the executive dashboard, they will have the score achieved for the overall score for this capability and the scores for each section: the integrated performance capability, communication and leadership support, creativity and innovation, and so on. Now, besides the audit report and the executive dashboard, we also provide a roadmap for continuous improvement. And basically, the recommendations that were made in the audit report will receive guidance in this roadmap for improvement. And this goes a little bit into consultancy, because we will we'll give audit organizations some suggestions on how to implement the recommendations and how to do it in a logical and chronological way. Okay, first things first. I'll give you an example. If we're talking about data analysis, we will encourage them first to go with simple data analysis techniques like root cause analysis, identifying the causes of issues, and later on to get to, I don't know, the integrated or the optimized maturity level, we will discuss about data modeling and predictive analytics. Now, alongside with the Roadmap for Improvement report, we have an infographic. This is a tool that can be used in performance review meetings because it summarizes the actions that were wrote in the Roadmap for Improvement report, so they can be easily tracked. I'm talking about progress here. Imagine a performance review meeting where a strategy manager just comes in and says, I want to know the progress with initiative 1.5. So this is basically the reason why we developed this infographic, to make it easier for them to track progress and actually implement the recommendations, because otherwise it will just be an audit report put on a shelf and left there until the next year or after 2 years when we come again and do another audit. So these are the audit outputs. You saw the audit report, the executive dashboard, the roadmap for continuous improvement, and the roadmap for continuous improvement infographic. Now, besides these outputs, the organization that has chosen to be audited for the performance culture capability receives the certificate of recognition with the achieved maturity level. In this example, it's level 4. And this happens for all the assessed capabilities. If they choose to audit the performance measurement capability, they will receive a separate certificate of recognition. If they choose to audit all the capabilities, they will receive 5 certificates of recognition and additional 1 for integrated performance excellence. Now, knowing all that I've told you today and how we assess the organization's capability to develop a performance-oriented culture, you've seen that the section we talked about communication, transparency in communicating performance results. We talked about leadership support, supporting creativity. We talked about innovation. We've talked about the rewards, the financial rewards, the non-financial rewards, and we've talked about the well-being of employees. Now, knowing all this and knowing some of the statements that we use to do the assessment and the assessment criteria, I want to ask you, what do you think is the maturity level of your performance culture capability? And I'm talking about your organization. And as before, please take 1 minute to answer this, this final poll. We asked some of the participants to our courses. In the first day, we talked about performance management, and we asked them, okay, what is performance management? I remember a very funny response. One attendee said, performance management is like visiting a dentist, hopefully once a year, and can be a painful exercise. This is something that we try to change. The people's perception about performance management. Okay, I think we can close the poll. Most of you answered. Let's see the results. Okay, not so good. More than 60% of you answered initial or emergent. Just 13% of you answered structured, integrated, or optimized. My congratulations to those that answered optimized. This shows confidence. If you are confident that you have an optimized performance culture capability, probably you do. Now, most of you, 38%, said emergent. So I've asked you this to prove to you that there is still work to do, and there is a very strong reason why. Just a second, I think my monitor went down again. Okay, let's go back. Yes, it's back. This is why we chose to include in our audit the performance culture capability. In my opinion, it really makes the difference. It really offers the competitive advantage to organizations. Now, I've asked you the question knowing what you've learned in this webinar, but please know that if you visit the GPA Unit website, gpaunit.org, you have the second section in the main menu. It's called self-assessment. You can go to that page and then choose performance culture. You have all the capabilities there: strategic planning, performance measurement, performance management, performance culture, and employee performance management. Now, if you do the self-assessment, it's free. You can complete it in 2 minutes. It has 24 statements. Now, I've only shown you 6 statements throughout this webinar, 6 statements from the evidence-based assessment and 6 from the perception-based assessment. Now, in the self-assessment, you have 24 statements. They are both from the evidence side and the perception side. So it'll give you a better understanding, a clear understanding on this type of assessment. You will understand better the assessment criteria and the statements that lay on the center of our audit framework, the statements that reflect best practices. So I encourage you to visit the website and do the self-assessment. It will provide you an insightful result with the perceived maturity level of your performance culture capability. So do the self-assessment to see whether the result is different from the one to the last poll. What you think now. Okay, what I want you to remember from this webinar is that the performance culture audit is designed to indicate the maturity level of this capability on a 5-level scale: initial, emergent, structured, integrated, optimized. The audit outputs highlight both the strengths and the weaknesses of this capability of developing a performance-oriented culture. This is something that I want to highlight, both strengths and weaknesses. According to the statements and the assessment criteria, we write in the report both what is good and should be continued, the positive feedback and the constructive feedback. Coming from the field of internal auditing, we were used to only write the bad parts. So auditees asked us, why do you never write the good things, the things we follow, the the results, and so on. In this report, in this performance audit report, we highlight both the strengths and the weaknesses of capabilities or performance management systems. Now, elevating current practices to best practices maximizes the added value generated by the performance-oriented culture. So we read a lot of articles, a lot of scholarly articles. We did research with our professional network to identify these best practices. Now, you have them all comprised in the audit framework. The performance culture audit is conducted with the help of the dedicated online platform, gpaunit.org. Remember, no crowded Excel sheets. You have everything there, the statements, the assessment criteria. The platform generates Excel sheets with the average scores automatically calculated, so it'll be very easy for you to set the weights and calculate the final score. And the self-assessment survey will help you gain a clear perspective on performance culture maturity assessment. So visit the website, do the self-assessment to see if the result that is provided to you is different from the one that you've answered in the last poll. You have some references here. Webinars archive. You have some upcoming webinars in the final slides of the presentation. The last webinar from my series is going to be on June 7. It's about how to conduct an employee performance management audit. Up until then, we have webinars with lessons learned from managing performance in the public sector. The next certification courses for certified performance audit professionals will be in Washington and London. We'll have others in November in Dubai and Singapore. And you have our certifications, the KPI Institute certifications, and the contact details in the last slide. Now, thank you very much all for listening to me up to this point. I hope that I presented in detail and in a comprehensive manner how the performance culture audit is conducted. We'll have a question and answers session now. I will ask my colleague Andrei to tell me if there are any questions.
Yes, indeed, there are a few questions. The first one would be, why should performance management, and particularly why should a performance management system be aligned with the budget of a company?
Well, I would ask you something back. When you do the budgeting, the first thing you take into consideration is the results. Like the budget of every department is aligned with the result of the work in that department. So this is why it should be aligned. So I'll give you another reasoning. If you have a high performing business line out of 5, okay, what will you want to do as a manager? You will invest more in the one that's high performing. That doesn't mean investing less in the others, but taking into consideration performance results while drafting the budget.
All right, thank you very much for your answer. And the second question would be, what is the difference, if there is one, between performance management capabilities and KPIs?
Oh, key performance indicators are advanced metrics, if you ask me. Performance management is much more than key performance indicators. Now, in theory, you have the company's identity elements like vision, mission, values. Okay, we write down a vision and a mission to document exactly what we want to achieve. These elements that are future oriented. Now, based on this, we write down strategic objectives. Now, these strategic objectives have to be measured with the help of key performance indicators. Basically, if we want to increase productivity, if we want to nurture a healthy learning environment, or other strategic objectives that we might have, we measure them with the help of key performance indicators. So it's not enough just to have key performance indicators, because you will just measure some results just to say so, but you have to know how the results that you measure help you achieve your strategic objectives. So if you ask me, in a simple comprehensive matter, you have the strategic objectives, you have 4 perspectives, not just financial. You have the customer's perspective, you have the processes perspective, you have the people learning and growth perspective. So you should have key performance indicators for the objectives that are on these 4 perspectives. And as you advance with managing performance in the organization, you will cascade these objectives and key performance indicators to departmental level and then down to individual level. So you will be able to monitor in, I don't know, 2 to 4 years, the individual contribution to achieving the organizational strategic objectives.
All right, once more, thank you very much for your answer. And a third question would be actually more of a statement for you to confirm. So
Okay.
one of our attendees said that each criterion regarding culture should be audited by both evidence and perception-based statements, as is his understanding. Is that understanding correct?
Could you repeat the statement, please?
So each criterion regarding culture should be audited by both evidence and perception-based statements.
Yes, yes. It's quite like this, to be honest. Okay. What we did was, first of all, we had the statements split it into 4 focuses, like tools, processes, results, and impact. Okay, so when we split the statements into evidence-based and perception-based, we took into consideration what we saw that is documented in practice. Okay, now most of the statements from the evidence-based part are focused on tools and processes, while the ones from the perception-based, most of them, are focused on results and impact. But that's not a general rule. We have statements in the evidence-based assessment that look to identify the results and the impact of performance culture in today's example. And the same in the perception-based assessment, we have statements that reflect on tools and processes. So it's a mix, but I can understand why you feel this, because I've only presented you 6 statements from one side and 6 statements from the other side. Now, if you log on to the platform and do the self-assessment, it'll become more clear. And if you want, you can go for a subscription and check out the entire platform and all the statements for this audit.
All right, and now on to our last question. How exactly is well-being related to performance management?
Well-being.
Yes.
I understand. Well, you must know that in the United Arab Emirates, we have a Ministry of Happiness and Well-being. So it has been proved scientifically, and I'm sure you're all confident of this, that happy employees are engaged employees. And people that are satisfied with what they do and the conditions that are provided for them to do their work will perform better. So this is basically why happiness and well-being was considered as a section in this performance culture audit. And I could ask all of you, I believe, this question: if you have a good communication in the organization, if you have support from leadership, if you are encouraged to be creative and innovative, if you are rewarded for your performance, aren't you happier and performing better day after day, year after year? I think you are.
All right. Thank you very much for your answers to these questions. And as of right now, there are no further ones. So this brings our Q&A session to an end. Aline, do you have any last words for our listeners?
Yes, thank you all very much for attending the webinar. Be sure to register for the next one. You have a section on the KPI website with upcoming webinars. Don't forget to try the self-assessment. It will give you a better picture, a clear image of this type of assessment. If you're interested in conducting such audits internally for your organization or as a freelance consultant and so on, reach out to us. You have a contact section on the GPA unit website. As you saw, we provide absolutely everything, the entire audit methodology, the entire audit framework based on thorough research and years of experience, the online platform that facilitates the delivery of the audit service. We provide guidance for writing the audit report and coming up with recommendations for improvement and so on. And let's all contribute to improving performance for organizations worldwide. So thanks again. Thank you, Andre, for hosting. I hope I'll see all of you in my next webinar, and have a great day ahead, and best of performance.
Thank you very much once more for your presentation. The KPI Institute appreciates your interest in the webinar How to Conduct a Performance Culture Audit. Follow our websites and our social media channels to find out more details and to subscribe to our next webinar, Managing Performance in the Public Sector, Lessons Learned, which will be held on the 30th of May by Mihai Toma and Teodora Gorski. Also, if you are interested in getting a certification granted by the KPI Institute on vital areas within the performance management discipline, you can explore our scheduled courses on marketplace.kpiinstitute.org. Thank you again for your participation and have a nice day.